Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and coming from somebody who's played games since the early 90s, it's kind of been a surreal experience to watch how gaming has evolved over the years. We've gone from pixel graphics all the way up to these cinematic blockbusters with just mesmerizing characters, creative worlds, and just very well-written stories. At times they can even rival some of the best stories, really, I'd say, in any medium, and those are the games specifically that I want to talk about today. So we're going to take a look at 20 of the best single-player, story-driven experiences that you can play right now on your Xbox. Now, keep in mind that this is only my opinion. This is not meant to be a definitive list, but what you can do here is make sure to list your favorites in the comments below. That way we can discover those games as well. But with that said, let's just go and jump right into it. Number 20, and to start this list off, I have Star Wars Jedi Survivor and Star Wars Jedi Fallen. Now, for any of you Star Wars fans out there, these are debatably the very best Star Wars games ever made. These were developed by Respawn Entertainment after all, and they are just a fantastic studio. They've made games like Titanfall and Apex Legends, so their quality fits right in line with their other releases, albeit they are still very different. These are cinematic action adventure games with an in-depth combat system that actually shares some common similarities with the Souls series. Now, I'm not necessarily the biggest Star Wars fan myself, but that's kind of the thing, because you really don't have to be when it comes to these games. They're really just simply that good. Number 19, Starfield and other Bethesda RPGs. So here I have the various Bethesda-based RPGs, and that starts off with their newest release, Starfield. This is an open universe game, if you will, and while I definitely think that there are some flaws in its experience, and I don't think it necessarily lived up to just some of the over-the-top hype that led up to its launch, but I, however, still think that it's an overall enjoyable experience and also a rare game that you can just completely get lost in if you like exploration. Unlike a lot of other games on this list, I'm not going to just praise its main story alone, because one of the things that makes Bethesda games just so special in the first place really is that sense of discovery. You might start off on a main quest, but one thing about their games is that it's not going to take you all that long until you stumble onto a side quest that's equally as interesting. Before you know it, you're going to find yourself going down this rabbit hole of side quests. And of course, all of this applies to Fallout and Skyrim as well. Bethesda's RPGs just really are ever ageless franchises that it feels like are going to be fun for all eternity. Number 18, A Plague Tale and A Plague Tale Requiem. Now, this is a duology that really stands out because of its unique mid-14th century atmosphere set in France, and because of its stealth-based gameplay. We don't really get a lot of high-quality stealth-based games anymore, but when it comes to A Plague Tale, this is one such exception. You play as two vulnerable children that are just trying to survive in its rat-infested world. So you don't play as some super soldier or anything like that, but instead you have to be crafty, and that really fits well into its dark, just grim story. And that's where I think these games really pull you in. They have exceptional stories that are all about family and survival, so I think they're very easy to relate to as well. Now, I also have to really applaud the voice actors and actresses because they sell this experience perfectly. Number 17, Gears of War and Halo. Okay, so yeah, I combined Gears and Halo for this spot because, this is kind of my way to highlight even more games, and that's what I really like to do when it comes to these videos. But these, more or less, are your staple Xbox franchises. Honestly, I'd even say that they're among my favorite games of all time, and even though they're very different games from one another, they do share some similarities. They're kind of these rare experiences that I'd explain as the complete package. You don't really see a lot of modern games anymore kind of offer the complete package, but when it comes to Gears and Halo, they not only offer a great multiplayer experience, but also a rich story that can be played by yourself or even cooperatively. Again, they are the complete package. Now, Gears, in my opinion, though, is the best third-person shooter franchise of all time, where you play as a group of survivors that are in the military and they're trying to save what's left of their planet. They've been invaded by these just horrifying monsters that's been living below their feet for who knows how long. And it's got this really mysterious element to it. I think that is one of the things that made the original trilogy just so special in the first place. And thankfully, they remade Gears 1 with Gears Ultimate. And even though Gears 4 and 5 aren't as beloved as the original trilogy, I still think that they're fun overall experiences. And then as for Halo, I mean, again, we're talking about one of the best first-person shooters of all time, but instead, it's more of your typical alien invasion. The great news here, though, is that you can play the entire Halo series with the Master Chief Collection, and the more recent Halo Infinite, which puts a new spin on the series with a fully open-world campaign, which I'd say surprisingly works very well. Number 16, Psychonauts 2. Now, you don't typically think about 3D platformers when you talk about good, story-driven games, but that's kind of where Psychonauts is a very special series. I mean, they have everything that you'd want in a good 3D collectathon platformer, and the level design is honestly just brilliant in these games. They get super creative in some of its levels, but on top of it's just excellent gameplay. It also legitimately has a good story. They have these quirky, memorable characters, and it might come off as a little goofy at times, but I'd also say that there's layers to its story. As a Psychonaut, what you do is that you dive into people's minds, and as you do that, you kind of see the world through their eyes. You might see their fears, their anxieties, their hopes and dreams. It's surprisingly deep, though it does this in a way where it's subtle, albeit powerful at the same time. Number 15, Kingdom Hearts. Okay, so Kingdom Hearts is legitimately one of my favorites on this list, and the way I always like to describe them is that they're magical, albeit convoluted experiences. On one side, it's a series that I think everybody should try at least once. But I'm also painfully aware that, yes, it's an intimidating series because Square Enix did themselves absolutely no favors by having like 16 games, where every game is important to its overarching story. Probably not a good decision on their part. But with that said, I still will encourage you to play them just because they really do have an interesting story to follow, and the gameplay, again, is just magical. It more or less combines Disney's universe with Square Enix's storytelling, and it's, again, I keep using this word, but it's true, it's a magical combination. Number 14, Cyberpunk 2077. Now, admittedly, Cyberpunk had a rough start when it first launched. It probably shouldn't have exactly launched in the state that it did. But now here we are years later, and CD Projekt Red managed to finally meet those initial lofty expectations. They fixed it up, and honestly, I think it's now among one of the better games available. It's got one of the better open worlds with its futuristic settings. It's got cool and creative gameplay where you can build out your character that uses cybernetics. And it's got a really interesting story about a character that becomes a mercenary in a gang-ridden futuristic city. Now, a lot of people will immediately recognize Keanu Reeves as one of the main characters. That's a big selling point for this game, and I think he does a phenomenal job. But you as the protagonist will kind of impact how the story plays out. And then there's the DLC, Phantom Liberty, and it's that expansion that I think really takes this game to the next level. If you held off on its initial release because of all of the different launch problems that it had, just know that that's now a thing in the past, and it is now a brilliant game. Number 13, Persona 3 Reload, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 5 Royal. Now, the Persona series really is just flat out among the best games within its respective genre. They're amazing turn-based JRPGs with monster capturing mechanics, and the way that they work is that they're split up into two different types of games. Basically, you play as an everyday high school student, and during the day, it's more or less a social sim where you manage your time, bond with different characters, and form relationships. But then there's this parallel world that you and a group of friends discover, and it's in this world where it becomes more of a dungeon-crawling RPG experience. This is where you fight and collect demons and uncover the mysteries that's affecting the human world. Now, it does cover some serious topics at times, and like I said, all three of these games are just top tier because they have amazing characters and amazing stories. Now, I will say that Persona 4 Golden is my personal favorite within the series, but really, you can't go wrong with any of these games. And I will say that Persona 3 Reload and Persona 5 Royal does feel a little bit more modern, considering their release dates. Number 12, Control. Now, there's very few studios out there that are as good at making story-driven experiences as Remedy Entertainment. They've made some absolutely amazing single-player experiences throughout the years, including Control Ultimate Edition. This is a very creative game in terms of its setting and its gameplay. Now, its gameplay is basically a third-person Metroidvania experience where you play as a protagonist who can unlock superhuman abilities. And some of its set pieces are just bonkers as its building quite literally shifts and morphs around you, which really makes for some truly memorable moments. I honestly think this is one of the most creative games that you can get right now, and that goes doubly so for storytelling as well. Remedy has somehow created this universe within gaming that defies all expectation, and even now I still kind of wonder where they're taking this story because it's truly an unraveling mystery. Number 11. Metal Gear Solid. Of course, I had to include the legend itself, Metal Gear Solid. These are some of my favorite games ever made, and I love the fact they're slowly making their way back to modern consoles. Konami's already released the Metal Gear Solid Volume 1 collection, which includes Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3, and they've also been hinting at a Volume 2 for some time in the future. Very interested in that. And hey, we're even getting Metal Gear Solid Delta, which is a complete remake of the ever-beloved Metal Gear Solid 3. Now, if you've never played any of these games, though, this is the franchise that set the bar for stealth, espionage, and storytelling. Hideo Kojima will forever be cemented into gaming history thanks to this very franchise that blew people away for not only its captivating story and great characters, but also their innovative gameplay. Number 10, Hellblade 1 and Hellblade 2. Now, these are smaller scope games, but with incredibly high production value. These are among some of the best looking games from a graphical standpoint, and if you're looking for something to truly showcase your Xbox Series X, well then Hellblade 2 is a game that will do exactly that, especially with their industry-leading motion capture. Now, this is where I have to really applaud the main actress, Melina Jorgens, because she absolutely kills it in these games. She really brings the protagonist to life in a way that very few games can do, and that's incredibly important for the Hellblade series as they really need to sell some of her inner demons. You know, she's constantly battling her own mind and inner thoughts, and that'll even transfer to the player because she sells this so believably well. Now, these are shorter games, though. You know, like I said, they are smaller in scope. Both games combined will take you about 14 hours to complete, and not everybody loves its more cinematic combat, but I think it fits in with its narrative very well and is definitely one of the more captivating, story-driven experiences on the market. Number 9, Alan Wake Remastered and Alan Wake 2. Now, the original Alan Wake was already a unique and just a weird experience, which you can play thanks to its remaster. But then there's the sequel, and it's just kind of like they dialed everything up to 11. This game is just absolutely bonkers in the best way possible. It's probably one of the most creative horror games that I've ever played, and that's something to kind of note here. Unlike the first game, this is a legitimate horror experience that takes inspiration from the Resident Evil series. It's just really a lot more bizarre, and it does some things that I've not really seen in any other game before. And that's why this game truly stands out. Now, unlike the first game, though, you do play as two different characters. Of course, you have Alan Wake, but you also play as an FBI agent that finds herself investigating a cult murder in a small-time town. Like I said, this is a legitimate horror game, very creepy stuff, but its story weaves together in this confusing, albeit captivating way that always keeps you wanting more. Yeah, I asked for Alan Wake 2 for like 10 years, and I feel like I'm going to do the exact same thing for Alan Wake 3. Number 8, the Tomb Raider rebooted trilogy. Now, of course, Tomb Raider is one of the most recognized franchises of all time, and even though Lara Croft has changed immensely since her debut in the 90s, I personally love the Tomb Raider reboots and some of the changes that they made. The gameplay is a lot of fun that combines third-person shooting, platforming, puzzles, and cinematic set pieces, but they also put a lot more focus on Lara Croft's character and her journey to become the Tomb Raider that she's known for today. Now, at times, its story can be very dark and grimacing because she has to kind of learn things the hard way, but it's an amazing story that I think helps the Tomb Raider rebooted trilogy stand tall as some of the better cinematic games ever made. Number 7, Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Now, when you hear about some of the best trilogies of all time, well then yeah, Mass Effect is always going to near the top of that list, and for a very, very good reason. Mass Effect is among some of the better sci-fi experiences in all of media, not just gaming, but truthfully, all media. They really bring its universe to life with some of the most memorable characters and just a great story that takes place over 3 games. Now, these are third-person shooter RPGs, and while I remember the original Mass Effect 1 being a little bit clunky for its time, that, however, has improved with the Legendary Edition. They made the first game feel a lot better than what it used to. Now, as for the story specifically, though, this is really where the series truly shines as you choose how the story plays out, and your save files transfers across the entire trilogy, which was unique back during the Xbox 360 era. And while it might have stumbled a little bit in Mass Effect 3, I still think the overall journey is an unforgettable experience. Number 6, Resident Evil. Now, Resident Evil is a franchise that almost kind of defies its genre. And what I mean by that is that it appeals to people beyond just your typical horror fan. Yes, it can be spooky, it can be scary, but it also has a great story, memorable characters and villains, and strong gameplay that keeps you on the edge of your seat. And I can say that about pretty much all of the mainline games except for maybe Resident Evil 6. Now, my personal favorites are Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4. Ironically, both of those have you playing as Leon Kennedy. Now, the remakes, though, are beyond a masterclass for gaming, and these are prime examples of how remakes should be. They completely bring the already amazing classic games to a modern era with spectacular visuals and major improvements that completely improves how they play. I cannot praise Capcom enough for how good of a job they've done bringing back the classic Resident Evil series. But I also have to say that the newer entries, being Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village, are also exceptional. Now, they're instead, though, designed to be first-person shooter experiences, which might be a big change for the series, but honestly, in some ways, it kind of makes them even more immersive. So whether you like third-person or first-person, really, the Resident Evil series is just a masterclass in gaming and also storytelling. Number 5, Yakuza and Judgment. Now, I firmly believe that there's not many games out there that are as good as the Yakuza series when it comes to cinematic, story-driven style of games. The narrative in these games are absolutely thrilling with crazy twists and turns, but then at the same time, it can also shock you by making you cry. These games are just brilliant when it comes to their storytelling, but they also tie that in nicely with their atmospheric Japanese cities and its over-the-top gameplay. These really are just excellent games with a lot of things to do in their dense cities. Now, there are 2 different styles of games here, though. So, for Yakuza 0 through 6 and for Judgment 1 and 2, these are more beat-em-up style of games. But then the 2 newest entries, Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, they're instead turn-based JRPGs. And at first, that might sound like a weird change, but surprisingly, it works very well. So honestly, I'd really recommend this entire series, and even though there's a lot of entries, most of these games aren't necessarily overly long. A lot of them can actually be completed in less than 20 hours. So don't be intimidated just because there's a lot of entries. But something that I will say here, though, is that I think that you should start with Yakuza 0 and then go from there. Now, you can also start with Judgment just because that's a spin-off series with its own unique characters, but either which way, both of these series are equally as amazing. Number 4, Nier Automata and Nier Replicant. Oh my, these games are masterpieces, and I truly do mean that. The first time I played Nier Automata, I kind of thought to myself, this game's a little bit weird. But the more I played it, the more hooked I became. It just has this fascinating setting with this really unique story that takes course over various playthroughs. And that's something that I do need to emphasize when it comes to these games. These are not the type of games that ends when you see their credits. It's honestly just kind of the beginning, and you should play through them at least 3 times. And then after that, I'm telling you right now, you'll be blown away. They're just amazing, and they just have this unique way of telling a story. And even though I do prefer Automata, I do want to highlight Nier Replicant as well. Both of these games are top tier, and in my opinion, just some of the best games of all time, and that goes well beyond their stories. They have amazing music, they have great worlds, interesting characters, and the action style of gameplay is just so much fun to play. I really do think that both of these games are must-play experiences. Number 3, Baldur's Gate 3. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 and its top-tier quality absolutely shocked the gaming community when it first released. And I think especially over on consoles because it is much more known on the PC side of things. But I'm telling you right now, if you give Baldur's Gate 3 a shot, you might really find yourself pleasantly surprised. It's now viewed as legitimately one of the greatest RPGs ever made. Its turn-based combat is excellent, it's got an expansive world, it's got great characters, a captivating story, there's a ton, and I mean an absolute ton of player choice. Its visuals look great, and I can just go on and on and on about all of the great things that this game does. It really is that good. And hey, even if you like the option to have relationships in games, yeah, well, they got plenty of that as well. So much so that some of it might actually surprise you a little bit. Baldur's Gate 3, though, in a lot of ways, it just kind of feels like it has everything imaginable that you need for a great RPG experience. Number 2, Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, if you want to talk about a flat-out masterpiece, then, I mean, we have to talk about Red Dead Redemption 2. The attention to detail for this game is absolutely insane like no other. I mean, they nailed everything down, including the smaller things, whether you open a drawer, get into a vehicle, or just with everything. It kind of feels like they thought about everything when it comes to Red Dead Redemption 2. You know, even your character, his hair and beard will grow over time if you don't take care of it. And it's just these small things, the attention to detail that makes it feel special. It really brings you into its fully realized world, which I think makes its story even more immersive than most other pieces of media. I mean, you do play as a cowboy in an old-time gang, so, you know, you don't necessarily play as a good guy per se, but the story turns out to be amazing the further you get into it, and the entire cast of characters are phenomenally well written, and also just well portrayed. It's honestly a story that blew me away by the end of its lengthy 50-plus hour campaign. It really is that good. And here we are at the number 1 spot, and I have to go with none other than The Witcher 3 with its next generation upgrade. I mean, you can still play this instant classic on the Xbox One, but if you have an Xbox Series, it really takes this game to the next level. I mean, this game quite literally is, in my opinion, just one of the best open-world RPGs ever made. In this game, you play as Geralt of Rivia, which, I guess you can kind of describe as a mercenary in the sense that he takes on different jobs of hunting down monsters and magical beings. There, however, is a more grand story here that I think is extremely interesting. I really like the characters in this game, as he also tries to track down and save some different people that he loves. And that's the thing that always really stood out to me about The Witcher 3. It kind of plays around with this morally gray area. You do make your own decisions, which impacts its story, though there's not really always a clear-cut answer as to what's good or bad. And I think that there really adds this extra layer to its decision-making and to its story that you really don't see in other games. I mean, I really don't know if there's a game that feels better in terms of its player choice. And I think that's a true testament to just how good its storytelling is and just how interesting the characters are written. I mean, it truly makes you feel like you're a part of this fantasy world, and that even leaks into its side quests, which are also very well written. So it's just from top to bottom, The Witcher 3 is an excellent game, and you know, of course, you know, that leaks into its gameplay as well. So I mean, even though this game is a little bit older now, I still think it's just as much of a must-play experience as it ever was. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but if you enjoyed the video, do make sure to hit those buttons below. I still have plenty more videos like this planned for the future, and if I miss one of your favorite games, of course, let me hear about those in the comments below. But until next time, peace out.